name is Jacqueline. I am a corporate flight attendant. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Jacqueline Travels, where I talk about all things flight attendant related. About a month ago, I put out a video titled How I Became a Flight Attendant. I will link it up here for you. And in the comment section, you guys wanted to know how I became a corporate flight attendant, which again is currently the type of flight attendant that I am. So I am here to share my story of how I became a corporate flight attendant, or a flight attendant who works on private jets. Before we get into the video, I would like to ask you to subscribe to my channel. This way you don't miss out on any future flight attendant videos. Let's get into story time. Now, the first thing that I want to point out is it was a total fluke that I made the transition from commercial flight attendant to corporate flight attendant. I just want to preface this vlog saying I understand how lucky I am, how good the timing was, and this is not the norm, especially for now. It is hard to get a corporate flight attendant job when we're not in the middle of a global pandemic, and it is even harder to get one now. So full disclaimer, I was incredibly lucky, and I don't suggest you take the route that I took to become a corporate flight attendant. I'll explain all of that. It involves broken bones. There was some drama. It is what it is. Years ago, we are talking 8 years ago, maybe even 9 years ago, I had signed up for job alerts on Indeed.com. This is something that I do recommend you do if you want to become a flight attendant. Sign up for job alerts on Indeed.com, and I would get emails every time an open flight attendant position came around. So that was 8 or 9 years ago. Fast forward a year from that point, 7 years ago, like 7.5 years ago, I was hired as a commercial flight attendant, and I loved it. I was so happy with my job. I didn't even really know what a private flight attendant was. I had no desire to switch airlines, no desire to give up my seniority. I was happy with my base. I was happy with the trips that I was awarded. I was happy with my coworkers. It's so loud out there. I'm sorry. My neighbors are like in a Harley motorcycle gang. I can't avoid it. Hopefully they just drive off soon. It's infuriating. Anyway, so not happy with my neighbors, but happy with my flight attendant job. And for 5 years, I never paid attention to any of the job alerts that came in my email because I was still signed up at Indeed.com for flight attendant positions. One day I just had some time to kill, and I was on the internet and I just looked at my email and I saw that a new job alert for a corporate flight attendant came into my mailbox, and out of curiosity or out of boredom, I just clicked on it that day, and I saw there was a contract corporate flight attendant position at an airport close by, and I was curious about it. I thought, hey, I've been a flight attendant for 5 years, like why wouldn't they hire me to work this corporate gig? So I took a look at my resume, I spruced it up a little bit, I added more flight attendant credentials in there, and I decided just to send it off on a whim. I was overly confident and definitely underqualified, because even when I sent my resume, I still didn't know what was involved with being a corporate flight attendant, and truly how different the corporate flight attendant job is from the commercial flight attendant job. So I went on with my day, and I had a trip the following day, and I got ready for work. I put on my flight attendant uniform. I looked at my crew sheet. I was familiar with one of the flight attendants, and I didn't know the other 2 flight attendants on board, or maybe there were 3. I think there were 5 flight attendants total. And I had no clue who our captain or first officer were. And I was working the number 1 position, so that meant I would have communication with the flight deck, and I would be the first flight attendant that passengers saw when they walked onto the airplane. So I drove to the airport, I checked in, I read any must-reads that I had, I checked my company file to make sure there were no notifications that I needed to keep with me on the plane or update my flight attendant manual with, or sign off or anything like that. And I made my way down to my gate, walked onto the plane, and did my safety checks. During safety checks, more of the crew came on. It seemed like a fun group of girls who would be working. We would be flying to San Jose, California that night, and we all prepared the plane before passengers came down with the specific job duties that each of us flight attendants had. So in walks the first officer. I introduced myself. Hey, I'm Jacqueline. I'll be up here taking care of you guys. I put water bottles on your seat. If you need anything else, let me know. In walks the captain a few minutes later. Again, hey, I'm Jacqueline. You've got water up there. If you need anything else, just let me know. And the captain walked into the flight deck, dramatically, slowly turned around and goes, "Oh, I know who you are." That totally caught me off guard. It made me so nervous. I was afraid. There was like a rumor going around that I was a disaster to work with or something. And I kept trying to think, like, his name doesn't sound familiar. His face doesn't look familiar. I know I haven't had a layover with him. How does this guy know who I am? And passengers had started coming down the jet bridge at this point, and it was driving me crazy, but I was greeting the passengers with a smile on my face and doing luggage control management and that whole thing. And I finally popped into the flight deck and I said, have we worked together before? And basically he said, no, but I know that you're trying to leave here. And at that point, I was even more confused. So I couldn't stay up and chat with him. And my PA system ended up ringing. The flight attendants from the back were calling me in the front. And they let me know catering didn't provide enough water for the flight, so we needed water. So I put in the call to catering. I'm waiting for them to bring the water up. And I peek in the flight deck and I was like, okay, you have to tell me what's up. Like, this is crazy. And he goes, oh, my wife, so-and-so, is a scheduler at so-and-so company. And she just so happened to ask me today if I knew who Jacqueline Travels was. And I said, no, I've never flown with her. Why? And his wife said, well, she applied for a corporate contract position at my company, and she's currently an airline employee where you are an airline pilot. What are the odds that we would end up working together that evening? So of course, after the captain tells me this, I'm like, oh, put on your best face, bring your A game. You are gonna rock this flight. You are gonna come heavily recommended. You're gonna be awesome. They're totally gonna hire you for this contract flight. So walk into the flight deck feeling much better, and catering comes on board, and they have 24 1-liter bottles of water. And I offered to just take it to the back so they didn't have to deal with passengers and everything. So I'm carrying the water to the back of the plane, and I lose my grip. And as I go to catch the water, my hand just snaps. And I'm like, oh my God, the pain is excruciating. So I go to the back, deliver the water. I'm looking at my hand and I'm like, oh, it just hurts. And the girls in the back are like, are you sure you're okay? They're like, let us know if you need anything. We can ice it or whatever. I'm like, no, it looks fine now. Like, it just hurts. I'm sure it'll feel better in 35 seconds. So I go back to the front of the plane. I confirm the passenger count with the captain and the first officer, confirm flight time, all of that sort of stuff. And I shut the flight deck door. And as I go to shut the main cabin door, I realized I can't grip the handle with my hand. So I asked the other girl who was up there with me, who saw me kind of like drop the water, if she wouldn't mind doing it just until my hand felt a little bit better. So she shuts the main cabin door. I feel like the story took a detour about how I broke my hand, but it has to do kind of with how I became a flight attendant. So she shuts the main cabin door. We strap into our jump seats, and I'm doing my 30-second review during taxi, and we take off and we hear the sterile bell, which means it's just basically safe for us to communicate with the flight deck and for us to get up and start preparing for service. And I looked at my hand and it's black and blue and swollen. And that's when it hit me, like, I'm on a transcon to San Jose, California, and we just left and I broke my hand. And to top it off, the captain is married to a woman who is going to hopefully be calling me for an interview for a job that I want later on this week. What am I gonna do? So I went to the back of the plane, and one of the flight attendants happened to be a former paramedic, and she said, oh, your hand is broken, honey. Like, we need to call the captain. I was like, don't call the captain. Like, this is a night flight. Passengers are gonna be sleeping. We're not full. I'll go to the hospital in California. Don't worry about it. And she's like, why don't you wanna call the captain? I never really admitted it to all of the flight attendants. The one who I knew, I kind of filled in. And so she ended up coming to the hospital with me when we left. And I made a whole video. If you want more details, I'll link that here for you, because I've definitely gotten off track at this point. But we landed in California, the flight is over. I landed in the back of the plane because I just wasn't going to be able to open an aircraft door in the event of an emergency because my hand was really broken. And obviously the captain ended up finding out. He called the paramedics and everything and just wished me the best. And at that point I was like, well, all right, that was my chance and I blew it, and that sucks. So after going to the hospital and getting x-rays and confirming that my hand was broken and dealing with crew scheduling and getting another flight attendant out to work the flight back home and putting me on a flight as a passenger since I wasn't able to work since I was incapacitated, I took OJI, which is an on-the-job injury, took my leave of absence. They cleared all of the flights from my schedule. I had a cast on, I had started physical therapy, and a couple of months went by, maybe like 2 months or so. And by this point, I had graduated to a soft cast. So I was doing my physical therapy, all of my exercises, and when I was done, I would have to wear a cast for the remainder of the time. And I remember my sister had just had a baby, my nephew, the sweetest little babe in the world. And I was watching him since I wasn't at work, and she had just returned to work. And I was on a walk with him, and I was pushing the stroller, and I was thinking about this job, and I was like, you know what? It's okay. I wasn't qualified. Eventually, I had done all my research on what a corporate flight attendant actually was. And I thought, everything happens for a reason. I wasn't looking to leave my job as a commercial flight attendant. I loved it there. I loved my company and my coworkers. And on that walk, I just accepted, like, this is not it. This is not meant for me. It's not my destiny or anything like that. And not even 5 seconds later, my phone rang from this company asking me to come in for an interview with the 2 other flight attendants that were employed there and the director of aviation and 2 pilots. So I went in and I left my cast in the car. I debated leaving it on my hand, but decided not to. And I met the pilot's wife that day, and she let everyone know that I had actually broken my hand on a flight her husband was working, so I wasn't able to hide it. And at that point, I wish I had my cast because I shook everyone's hand. It was my right hand that I broke, and I was in excruciating pain every time someone touched me. I thought it was going to be a big setback, but it wasn't. And I remember sitting in the interview with the 2 flight attendants, and they said, well, why don't you do your airline evacuation and show us what that's like? And I only do this during recurrent or when I'm doing my 30-second review in the jump seat. So that really put me on the spot. But they explained that they wanted someone who, on top of had service training, also was proficient in safety training, because generally the corporate side is more service oriented than safety oriented, or it's not as extreme as the airline safety procedures. And I did my review, and I met with the director of aviation, and then I met with the pilots, and then they gave me a tour of the jet that I potentially could be contracting on, and they showed me everything. And we talked about food and what my favorite meals are to cook and to eat and how I entertain. And it was just not like any flight attendant interview that I was expecting. And a couple days went by, I think over a week, and I didn't hear anything. And again, I was like, it's okay, I'm accepting my fate. Now I know what it takes to be a corporate flight attendant. I'm gonna work on these skills because this actually does seem like a lot of fun, and if I can keep my commercial flight attendant job and still contract, I would be set up pretty well. I got a phone call, and it was from the director of aviation, and he let me know there was a 4-day trip to Colombia in 3 days, and asked me if I was available to contract that flight. He said the flight attendants who work there will give me the training that I need, and it'll be like a test run. They want to see how I do, and potentially it could lead to employment in the future. So I worked that flight to Colombia. I was so nervous, but I also prepared as best as I could, and the flight attendant who trained me was incredible and patient, and I took my notes. I outlined like every single thing I'm supposed to do in order of how I'm supposed to do it. And I enjoyed a few days in Colombia with the director of aviation. Actually ended up being the pilot on this trip, and a pilot from England. And we had a great time, and I studied my butt off in those 2 days during my downtime for my layover in Colombia. And 3 months later, I found myself in Savannah, Georgia, attending Flight Safety International Training to become certified to become a full-time corporate flight attendant. Luckily, as a well-fed Italian girl, I have a pretty extensive food background. My parents used to own a restaurant. My dad used to own a catering company. I worked for the catering company for a few years, and I love to entertain. I love to have people at my house. I love to cook for people. So the food part and the service part came pretty naturally to me. And then the safety part of the corporate flight attendant training was kind of a breeze, just because it's so much more extreme when you're a commercial flight attendant. So training was easy. I felt confident going through it, and I just knew I wanted to start a full-time career as a corporate flight attendant. This is a long story. If you're still with me, make sure to grab like a glass of water when I'm done talking. You might be dehydrated at this point, or get yourself a snack. long story short, eventually what happened was the company who I contracted with ended up calling me. They thought I would be a good fit for the company, for the passengers, and they liked that I got along well with the crew and the other flight attendants there. They thought our dynamic was good, and they offered me a full-time position. So, very, very long story, not very short at all. There was a sub-story in there. Now you know every little detail involved, but that's how I became a corporate flight attendant. And again, my circumstance is very different. I fell into this. I don't think people really fall into this job. I think it takes a lot of work, a lot of hustling, a lot of networking, a lot of putting yourself out there and meeting new people. And those are things that I definitely have to do in order to continue contract work. But I became lucky that I found full-time work the way that I did. So who knows, if you break a bone, it could lead to something absolutely fabulous. Thank you guys for wanting to see this video. Thank you guys for sitting through 2 stories. Please make sure that you are subscribed to my channel so you don't miss out on any future flight attendant videos. Also, please leave me and my formerly broken hand a thumbs up for this video. If you are looking for me on social media, my Twitter is @JackTravels, JAC Travels. And if you're looking for me on Instagram, I'm Jacqueline Travels, spelled the same way it is here on YouTube. Again, thank you guys for watching. Be safe out there, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.